Talking to Douglas Kruger about, he's saying that's how you do it. He's talking about books, of course. We get so many people saying, well, how do you write a book? So how do you write a book? Now, Douglas Kruger, how many books have you written?
I'm up to 7 at the moment,
Okay.
and the answer to your question is slowly but surely, word by word.
As simple as that. Okay, give us the complicated answers. Okay, so we know no matter what, it's a very small percentage of people who write books. Many dream it and they never get down. We can't get those that are not interested. That's a different debate. But those that are listening and they believe they want to write, what should they do?
Yes, so you're listening to SAFM today and you have this burning desire in your heart to take an idea, a notion, something that you're passionate about, and turn it into written words on a page. And let's actually just stop for a second and give that the honor that it deserves, because it goes from being a notion in passing to something permanent that can be passed down through generations. And if we're going to get really deep on this one, we can make the argument that one thing that sets humanity apart is this idea that we can make a sound, make a scratch, draw a little line, write a word, and that idea that is transmitted through that can pass through the generations. So this is something quite profound. It's something that we should really approach with a little bit of reverence.
Well, you're right. I'm just thinking now, a book would be, in many ways, the modern version of a caveman or woman scribbling something on a cave and say, what a story. So, in fact, this is the updated version.
It's
right?
what we do as human beings. We started off by putting our hands on the wall of a cave, and today we sit in front of our computers and we pass ideas along. And that means, of course, that the next generation can go further, see more, and do better than what we did.
Okay, so someone's
this is
fired
important.
up, they want to have a legacy, they've got a mission.
Right.
What should they be doing?
How do we practically go about it? I'll share five tips with you, and they're fairly simple ones, but we can go into a bit of depth on each one. The first one. The instant that you have your idea, your notion, even the beginnings of an inkling of something that you think is going to be a book, please start making notes. This one has caught me out many, many times, and in both the negative and the positive sense. So, for example, I'll have an idea into my head for something that I've been thinking about, dreaming about, and I'll make a little note on my cell phone. And then I send it to myself, and I'm actually amazed to discover later on that I had forgotten the idea.
Yeah.
So it was gone. I mean, it was way out of my consciousness. You read your own idea and think, oh, that's pretty clever. I like that guy. Yeah. And what that shows us, of course, is that if you hadn't written it down at the time, you're losing gold. And the wording in which it came into your mind is the kind of the energy, the visceral energy of that idea. Okay. So my whole process, my starting point is just to make notes as I go. The second I think I have a something, I start making notes on my phone.
So weird. What I'm saying, you can get this aha moment on radio right now, right? You could be listening, you could be driving. It may not be the most friendly environment to make notes. What should they be doing?
Well, one of the simplest ways to do it in practical terms is to send an email to yourself. I just use my smartphone. So I have a standard headline that I use for that, which is the word add, as in addition. And if I have the word add, it means add to the manuscript or add to the book. And I can then do a search afterwards in my email for all of the emails entitled add. And that becomes kind of a breakdown of what the book is going to be. And organizing the book after that is actually relatively easy, because you tend to have this collection of notions, this collection of ideas.
So it's like what, 200 one-liners?
Whatever it is. I mean, you know, my particular books follow a 50 ways to format. Every single book is a 50 ways to, and it's all entrepreneurial in nature. So I have to collect 50 different ways. But even if you're writing a novel, or whether you're telling a history of a region or a people, whatever the case might be, you will have passing thoughts about things that must be included. And sending those notes to yourself, getting them down, is the starting point. It gives you the raw material. Afterwards, you can put them into the correct order. But it's capturing them in the first place that is critically important.
Okay, so order in the initial stages.
Don't even worry about the order. Your brain's
would I assume that that's the problem? People think if they want to write, they need to write paragraphs up front. And
in many other ways, that paralysis by caution and by over-preparedness becomes a problem as well. And we'll see it in the other steps as well. So at this point, you really just want to brainstorm, get the ideas, let it play in your subconscious, and you will tend to, as with all things psychological, if you're thinking about a topic, you will notice more about it, more ideas will come to you, because you're consciously open to it. It's just how the brain works. So that's number one. Number two, read other books on the topic. Stephen King, in his own book titled On Writing, expresses how he is baffled by the idea that people who want to become full-time authors don't read in their genre extensively. He says he reads 3 novels a week. I'm nowhere near that in terms of researching my own field, but imagine the amount of rhythmic pattern thinking you're taking in by reading 3 different examples of that genre every single week. You're starting to see the nuts and bolts and the underlying opinions of this thing. So read other books on the topic, and even if you take a minimalist approach, let's say, for example, you are writing perhaps a book about the president, something controversial down those lines. What you want to do is find the 3 leading books on the topic that have been published to date. And what that does is it brings you up to speed with the thinking. There is a level of knowledge and a level of narrative that's already out there, and you absolutely have to be familiar with it.
So, for example, you said your focus is very much on entrepreneurship and business help. So you're doing your first book. Which 3 books would you have looked at?
Well, when I started my last one on innovation, took the sort of the odd angle saying they're your rules, break them. So it's about disruptive innovation and so forth. So I read more than 3 books on that one while doing the research, but I went for all the latest things that had to do with disruption, innovation, and so forth. And it gives you the kind of terminology that's being battered around in that world, the nomenclature, the thinking, and also what tends to happen is when you read the latest books, they will point out which older ideas have been discredited. And that's incredibly important when you get as far as approaching the publisher. They don't want to look at a manuscript, and actually you'll discover that they're aware that the whole field has moved on and you are not at the pinnacle. That's a big deal, and we'll revisit that one when we talk about actually getting published.
Looking at other people's books, would that not then encourage a copycat syndrome?
Excellent
question.
If
not deliberately, it's in your subconscious and you start writing like
and that's exactly why, gosh, your timing, Ashraf, is superb, and we didn't set this up in advance. Point number 3, I've actually got here, and I'll hold it up so you can see it. Begin writing when you have about 3/4 of what you need. And it's for exactly that reason. You're dead right. If you have done extensive research for years, you're going to end up sounding like the other authors, and it becomes groupthink. So what you want to do is this combination of that visceral emotion that you captured in your initial notes. It was your driving energy, plus the latest research. And for that reason, I'm a big advocate of researching as you write. That keeps your ideas fresh. It keeps you saying what you want to say, but at the same time, you're finding out what else has been said. And that's a wonderful way of balancing the freshness, the authenticity of your voice as an author with having sufficient ideas. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's absolutely perfect.
Right.
Part of that idea as well, when I say begin writing when you have about half to 3/4 of the total content, is the writing process itself. Don't fall into the mistake of waiting until you have half a day or a full day or a weekend retreat away to start writing. The reality, Ashraf, real authors and the men and women who get this done grab 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, and they just keep at it. So if you're waking up in the morning prior to your kids opening their eyes, 20 minutes worth of production is well worth your while. Another 20 minutes, half an hour during lunchtime, perhaps an hour in the evening. That adds up remarkably quickly, much quicker than if you waited for those bigger open blocks.
Is that the big stumbling block? People expect this free day.
Yes, and it never happens. It absolutely never happens. This is something that you do on the run. And I think there's a psychological advantage to it as well. When you are doing it on the run, it almost becomes more conversational, and it brings a freshness of ideas, and it keeps you in the narrative. If I can refer back again to Stephen King, he says that when he puts a manuscript aside for 3 or 4 weeks, it starts to sound like a telegram from an alien planet. It's not him anymore. And for that reason, if you reverse that logic, we have to stay close to the narrative of what we're doing to keep it going. It has its own internal voice, its own internal logic, and if we step away for too long waiting for just the right moment, we lose that sense of the thread and the continuity. And it stops feeling like a conversation with a reader and starts feeling like a written project.
Okay, so quick one. Yes, you say don't wait for the one full day off, but ideally, how much time should you spend a day, keeping in mind that it's not your full-time job for most people?
The days are perhaps not the right increment to measure. It's the word count. If you have something above, say, 45,000 words, you've got a book. If you have anything in the region of, say, 60 to 80,000 words, you've got what you might call, and this is a very loose term, an average-sized book. Anything more than that, and it starts becoming a very large book.
and when is the book? When is it too little to be a book?
I would say anything under 45,000, you're really going to struggle. Now, having said that, books
why does that matter?
Well, it takes up a certain amount of shelf space, and there are practical reasons. If a spine is physically small on a shelf, it's unlikely that people will actually see the title.
in a bookstore.
But let's contradict that one. I mean, it's things like, say, the chicken soup for the souls, or even Who Moved My Cheese? It's tiny. I would estimate that at 10,000 words or less. Yeah. So it's not a hard and fast rule.
But otherwise, 40,000 is what you say.
45,000 is really sort of entry level into a sort of a moderately sized book. Yeah. Okay, so that brings us up to number 4. And that is learn some basics about how to keep pages turning. Probably the all-time master at this one is Dan Brown with the Da Vinci Code and those kinds of books. I mean, you cannot put them down. They are unforgiving page turners. They haul you from one cover to the other. Now, of course, you can, to a certain extent, in a more subtle and in a more sedate way, apply that to non-fiction and to business books. Great example, Malcolm Gladwell and, say, Outliers. He takes a question that he sets up at the beginning of a chapter. And the question essentially is success a product of luck, of hard work, or of your date of birth? And he doesn't answer the question up front. He leaves you waiting for it till the end of the chapter.
So he would tease it along.
Exactly that. And it's simple little things like that that we can learn. Best book I've ever read on how to do that is called Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. And I would recommend the audiobook through the Audible platform, Made to Stick, as in how to get your message to stick.
Okay, so page turner, we've got that.
Yep, make it a page turner. Okay, the final tip is to do with style, and there are basically just 2 things that you want to watch out for. The most accepted writing style today combines a conversation between equals, so it's as though you're talking directly to the reader, and the craft of showing what you mean. So it's not heavily literary, it's not very distanced from the reader, it sounds like a chat between you and I, in which you assume your reader is as intelligent as you are, but doesn't know this information yet. And that's a great tone.
Like how you speak on radio, don't be too forward. and read and sort of read in the same way and write books in the same way. Yeah. Okay, just the last thing. We're going to talk about publishing next week. So you've got your book, now do you find a publisher? But just right now, people who have a story to tell, but they don't know how to write. Is there a how-to, besides your lessons, can they go to someone? Should they go to someone?
Do you know, I would tend to avoid, there are very good writing courses out there, and you certainly can invest in them. I think they are well worth your while. There are good ones in South Africa. The number one learning tool is to read books, and honestly, the master key to it is this. If you can get the reading audience to see it in their mind, it's working. So instead of just a discussion of ideas in abstraction, you want them to see pictures moving in their minds. If you're doing that, you're doing it right.
Rights to pictures. Douglas Kruger, thanks for your time. I'll leave it to you to tweet all that information and put it on Facebook as well. We want to share it as well. And some great advice. And some of the books that you've got. Put those books up there as well.
Will do.
Yeah. Read books. It's a good way to learn to write books. In fact, I should say I've started. We'll talk about this by the time. Right.